Then, the army moves in.
What are they trying to cover up?
A close encounter of the beetle kind.
That's a UFO, you know. But some part of you doesn't want to believe it.
Lennon claimed that as a child in Liverpool, he had been abducted by aliens.
And on a remote nuclear launch site, a sinister visitor.
Just like that, one after the other, it takes these missiles offline.
If the technology exists to turn these nuclear weapons on and off at will, the combined might of the world's militaries might not be sufficient to fight off such an invasion.
Once the stuff of science fiction, now caught on camera, finally forcing governments to reveal what they know.
UAPs are unexplained, but they are real.
Many of these phenomena have been cited in training ranges. We're very much concerned about safety of flight.
So let's just speculate for one moment that these things, whatever they are here to do not very good things.
Impossible engineering, terrifying encounters, sinister cover-ups. This is evidence of the unexplained. May 13th, 2020, Marseille, Brazil. It's late at night in this quiet municipality, just across the bay from the much more lively Rio de Janeiro. When suddenly, the peace is broken by something entirely unexpected.
Thousands of people saw strange, brightly lit objects in the night sky over the mountains.
Many start to film the spectacle on their phones, uploading the footage to social media.
The mesmerizing display bewilders those watching below.
Gente, me fala que porra é essa?
But then, according to some locals, all hell breaks loose.
Reports claim that Brazilian army helicopters suddenly arrive and chase the unidentified flying objects towards the forest. One of the UFOs apparently crashes, and the whole horizon is lit up by an explosive green light.
At dawn the next day, things get even stranger.
The next morning, when people wake up in Marseille, they find that the entire area has been cordoned off by the Brazilian military.
Explosions and gunshots are heard, and a plume of smoke is seen, which seems to come from the crash site. There are allegations that local police and journalists have been refused entry to the site, and civilian drones that attempted to film over the area have been shot down.
Ever since the infamous Roswell incident in July 1947, there have been rumors of UFO crash sites around the world. But this is the first time there has been so much video evidence connected to a supposed crash.
What is highly unusual about this case is the sheer amount of clear footage recorded by multiple witnesses showing these orbs zigzagging across the sky.
It causes a social media frenzy in Brazil, as does the speed with which these platforms take down the footage, with moderators claiming they're fakes.
But can this many films from so many different people really all be fake?
Surely there must have been something out there, but the question is, what?
Brazil takes UFOs very seriously, unlike many of its counterparts. The country has officially acknowledged that UFOs exist since the 1950s.
Indeed, since 2010, the Brazilian Air Force has been required by law to register any sightings of unidentified flying objects.
All military and civilian pilots, as well as air traffic controllers, have to register all UFO sightings with the National Aerospace Defense Command.
Many Brazilians are deeply wary of UFOs. In this country, unknown flying objects are rarely seen as friendly explorers from other planets, but a deadly menace, here to do harm to the human race.
The roots of this mistrust may date back to something that happened in a city in the eastern Amazon called Colares back in 1977. Residents of the city saw UFOs which they claimed had an almost kind of vampiric quality. They call them chupa-chupas or suck-sucks. They said that the craft sucked blood from their bodies. And the eminent UFO investigator Jacques Vallée, who looked into this incident afterwards, also claimed that the locals said that the craft emitted some kind of radiation ray which blasted them and killed some of the residents.
The Brazilian military sent a team to investigate and declared it a case of mass delusion. But, according to a local physician, there was evidence of a cover-up.
A certain Dr. Carvalho was told to lie to the traumatized patients about what had caused their injuries.
And 20 years later, in 1997, the military officer who led the investigation told researchers a very different story to the official report.
Colonel Urangi Holanda said that his men had been terrified and they had seen mysterious objects both emerging and darting back into the sea. In his interview, the colonel added that he would soon be turning 70 if he made it, and then made the curious comment, "If I don't disappear before then." 3 months later, he was found hanging by his belt.
If there was a cover-up at Colares nearly 50 years ago, it's perhaps no surprise Brazilians are unsatisfied with explanations given for the events in Marseille.
Skeptics say these bright lights in the night were most probably drones or skydivers equipped with pyrotechnics or even Chinese lanterns. But if that was the case, why would the drone operators or skydivers not come forward and explain they were behind the mystery?
The heavy military presence evidenced by multiple videos on social media when there normally isn't one, and the repeated denials by firefighters, police, military and the government rather suggests that something was going on, and it was a bit more than a display of Chinese lanterns or pyrotechnics.
Perhaps there was a strange object in the sky, but it was the authorities that were controlling it.
Could these glowing orbs be experimental craft, part of some top-secret mission devised and authorized by the Brazilian military? Is that what all the secrecy's about?
But these lights were seen moving across the sky, filmed by hundreds, if not thousands of witnesses.
Brazil is the 5th largest country on Earth, over 3 million square miles, and more than 45% of it is covered in barely inhabited jungle. If the military were going to test secret technology somewhere in the skies over this country, the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro seems a strange option.
The Brazilian media has reported that both the military and the authorities have no record of an unidentified craft in the area that day. Nevertheless, there was a significant ground and air operation which was filmed.
Could these lights be craft from another world after all, and the authorities just keeping quiet while they investigate to prevent national hysteria?
So far, there's no explanation from anyone.
What are they trying to cover up?
March 24th, 1967. Malmstrom Nuclear Missile Base, Montana, USA. One of the most heavily guarded military installations on Earth.
Within the minutes, you can put a warhead anywhere on the planet you want to. That is, being a crown jewel for our country, something that we protect very carefully.
America has over 31,000 nuclear missiles aimed at Soviet targets. Malmstrom's nukes are hidden in silos around the base.
The missiles are typically kept some distance below the ground and protected by large blast doors. They're connected physically or electronically to a missile launch control center.
It's the early hours of the morning, and life for the officer in charge is about to change forever.
Robert Salas says that he was on duty as the Deputy Missile Combat Crew Commander in the Launch Control Center of what was known as Oscar Flight. This is a group of 10 intercontinental ballistic missiles. Reportedly, one of the topside, that's above ground staff, sees what looks like a star zigzagging across the sky.
At a press conference in October 2021, Bob Salas described receiving the call from base security alerting him.
Not an airplane, sir. No engine noise, can't fly that fast, making 90-degree turns, stopping on a dime, reversing course, that kind of thing.
The description is so wild that Bob dismisses it as a false alarm and hangs up. But a second call quickly follows.
He was very, very frightened. I could tell by his voice. He was shouting into the phone, screaming and saying that there's this lighted object, a bright orange, a red-orange light pulsating. Guards all out there with their weapons drawn wanted me to tell them what to do next.
Salas makes the decision to secure the site, and he decides then to contact his superior officer at the command site. But somebody at security by this stage is injured, and the security team suddenly terminate the call.
Bob says that he woke his commander, who was on a scheduled sleep period, and he's briefing him when the first alarm klaxon goes off. Before they can investigate, another alarm goes off, then another, then another.
The alarm signal can mean only one thing. All 10 missiles are inoperable and unstable. America's arsenal is apparently at the command of whatever is piloting this craft, hovering above the base. Eventually, the security staff reported the craft had taken off, but that wasn't the end of the nightmare scenario for the men at Malmstrom.
Maintenance crews had to work all day and all night to bring the missiles back onto alert, by which time they had not been functioning for something like 24 hours.
Different silos geographically spread around, where all 10 of those silos were brought down offline. And yes, it appears that they were brought offline by a UFO.
It's a terrifying story, and Salas has stuck to his account for over 55 years. But perhaps in the fraught era in which they happened, the events of that night don't need an otherworldly explanation.
Salas was operating during the height of the Cold War.
The nuclear arsenal of the United States was controlled by analog technology, often in the hands of tired, frightened men.
Human and technological errors could easily have led to a catastrophic accident.
On October 25, 1962, the U.S. nearly went to war with Russia after a shadowy form was seen scaling the perimeter fence on the Duluth Sector Direction Center, a military installation in Wisconsin.
The alarm was sounded that a possible attack was underway.
At nearby Volk Field, the wrong alarm switch was thrown, and Air Force pilots scrambled to launch bombers into the air, armed with nuclear bombs to attack Russia.
The intruder on the fence turned out to be a bear, and as for the planes on a doomsday mission, a quick-thinking official managed to drive across the airfield and stop them taking off.
Bright lights in the sky could be mistaken for UFOs by weary and paranoid soldiers. Later, during the Cold War in the early 1980s, very similar experiences to those at Malmstrom were being reported over 5,000 miles away at a missile base in Soviet-controlled Ukraine.
Colonel Boris Sokolov claimed that aliens took over his silo as well.
On October the 4th, 1982, multiple witnesses from the base reported strange lights and saucer-shaped discs in the skies overhead.
Sokolov reports that after the discs were sighted, they seemed to seize control of the missile controls. But unlike what happened at Maelstrom, instead of turning them off, they switched them to launch mode.
The access codes appeared spontaneously on the screens, witnessed by dozens of terrified servicemen.
Sokolov says that when the UFOs suddenly vanished, the system reset itself to normal. Armageddon was avoided. But it seems these apparent UFO incidents on both sides of the conflict had leaders worried that there might be a third combatant entering the Cold War.
There was a secret agreement between Russia and the United States in the late 60s saying, if you see a UFO, please call us first, because we want to make sure that we don't confuse a UFO as some sort of mistaken identity and a provocation for nuclear war. There's a very, very direct, very strong link to UAPs and our nuclear technology and the development of our nuclear technology. The question is, what is it?
Some experts believe that it's the intelligence that's maybe operating behind these phenomena that essentially wants to protect us from ourselves, to ensure that we don't end up incinerating each other and the planet.
Perhaps this explains Pentagon officials' continuing reluctance to discuss the incident at Malmstrom. Salas's account of the events, which he says he reported to the Department of Defense, was raised at a congressional hearing in Washington on May the 17th, 2022.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly.
U.S. Congressman Mike Gallagher wants to hear the views of leaders from the U.S. intelligence establishment on the reported events.
At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report?
I have heard
the event at Malmstrom seems to have posed a direct threat to national security. But the task force investigating unidentified aerial phenomena has no information to offer.
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance of the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
Well, I would say, it's a pretty high-profile incident. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that are out there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our attention.
So how would it have to be officially brought to your attention? I'm bringing it to your attention. Sure, this is pretty official.
Sure.
Congressman Gallagher places the Malmstrom incident of 1967 firmly in the task force's in tray marked urgent.
It will finally have to be officially investigated, and that investigation publicly acknowledged.
If the technology exists to turn these nuclear weapons on and off at will, the combined might of the world's militaries might not be sufficient to fight off an invasion.
I looked left, and there was this thing about 100 yards away, and I could have hit it with a stone if I threw it. And one part of me all the time was saying, that's a UFO, But some part of you doesn't want to believe it,
This is the voice of John Lennon, a member of one of the world's most famous bands, the Beatles. He's describing an extraordinary close encounter he claims to have had in 1974 while living with his girlfriend May Pang in New York.
It's a Friday night. John and May are in for the evening. May is ordering a pizza.
The temperature drops, and May decides to turn off the AC.
John is lying on the bed, naked, looking through potential artwork for his new album, Walls and Bridges.
It's a typical evening for the couple, who are renting an apartment on East 52nd Street in the heart of Manhattan.
At 9 p.m., John feels the urge to go to the window.
John looks outside and witnesses something that he can't quite explain. It was a dark craft-like object with white lights flashing on and off underneath the craft and a red light on the top.
John yells to May Pang and she rushes to join him immediately on the balcony to see what all the fuss is about. May describes seeing something the size of a Learjet in the skies. Now, to give you an idea of what that would have been in terms of scale, the Learjet 35A in the 1970s had a wingspan of 39 feet 6 inches. May also mention that it travelled sideways and was shaped like a flattened cone.
The two stand there naked for about 10 to 15 minutes watching this craft.
It reportedly passes over the United Nations building and then shoots across the East River towards Brooklyn.
Immediately afterwards, John Lennon draws a picture of the conical craft.
In a radio interview, he reveals he then sought a little help from a friend.
I got a friend to call the police and call the newspapers the next day to check if anybody else had seen anything. And a couple of people had rung in and seen something in the same area at the same time as me.
But despite Lennon's claim that others independently reported a UFO in the heart of the city, no one else actually ever comes forward to confirm the sighting.
You would think in a population-dense area like New York, you have a lot of eyewitnesses, you have a lot of people seeing a UFO. But first of all, you got a lot of light pollution. And two, you've got high-rises, right? When you are in a downtown metropolitan area surrounded by buildings, you can probably see about 10 degrees worth of sky at any given time. That's it. So it's not really surprising that someone in an apartment down the street could see a UFO. Meanwhile, you are just a block away and you see nothing.
Clearly, if it's to be believed, it's a remarkable encounter, but historically people have questioned the validity of the story.
John Lennon may have genuinely believed he saw a UFO, but as an objective paranormal eyewitness, he is far from perfect.
The incident occurred in what is famously known as Lennon's Lost Weekends, the moniker that he used to describe his period of introspection between 1973 and 1975 when he was separated from Yoko Ono.
Not only was John Lennon one of the most famous people in the world at the time, he did also have a reputation for taking mind-altering drugs.
Lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD, is a synthetic drug that belongs to a group of drugs called psychedelics. LSD is a powerful hallucinogen that can distort perceptions, mood and thoughts, and also lead to visual hallucinations that can appear to distort space and time.
In 1974, Lennon says he was now favoring alcohol over LSD, but the effects of LSD have a habit of returning when you least expect it.
Clearly, there is always the question of, well, could this be some sort of psychedelic flashback? As we know, LSD can come back and you can have these flashbacks.
So the big question is, was Lennon merely experiencing one of his famed LSD trips?
But LSD may unlock more than just subjective hallucinations. In 2020, scientists discovered that mind-altering chemicals like LSD appeared to be a different kind of gateway drug, potentially providing a portal to another world.
Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore in the United States documented over 2,500 people's entity encounters after ingesting dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, which is a chemical compound with mind-bending properties very similar to LSD.
Entities, small alien or elf-like creatures, would appear to the users after they'd taken the drug. And a huge proportion of the people surveyed swore these beings were more than just a figment of their drug-altered minds.
95% of the participants reported that these entities were conscious and intelligent, and 75% of them reported believing that these entities continued to exist even after the effects of the drug had worn off.
But Lennon insists he was clean and clear-headed at the time of the sighting.
John was very adamant that he saw this UFO without taking drugs.
It was below rooftop level and it was just coasting around very quietly like a tourist, you know.
Amazing.
And it was just pot luck that I saw it.
Amazing.
Excuse the expression. And I was straight as a die. I was straight as a die.
And his descriptions of the event over the years remain pretty consistent. Furthermore, we also have May Pang as a witness.
May Pang's personality is very different from her boyfriend John's.
She was the stable one of the relationship, and she didn't take drink or drugs.
If it was seen by two eyewitnesses at the same time at the same place, that becomes a lot harder to just explain away, especially if both of them claim they weren't under the influence of any type of drug or psychedelic.
Despite fears for his credibility, Lennon was so convinced by his experience that he printed "I saw a UFO" inside his Walls and Bridges album.
I almost took it off the album. At one time I said, pull it off. They're going to say he's crazy, you know. But I thought, look, I saw it. You know, I don't care what anybody says. There it was, and nobody can explain what it was to me. So I said UFO, you know.
And the search for the origin of Lennon's Manhattan UFO encounter might not lie in his drug-fueled life in 1970s New York, but in his experiences in another city decades earlier.
In the 20th century, Liverpool was a hot spot of reported UFO activity.
The city on the Mersey, where Lennon grew up, was famous for launching some of the biggest musical acts of the 1960s. But the local area also had a darker reputation for strange and unexplained occurrences.
In 1966, police officer Donald Cameron reported seeing lights hovering over St. Helens.
People also reported weird time slips on Bold Street in the middle of the city.
In fact, there were so many supposedly weird things going on that the local press speculated that Liverpool was like a kind of Bermuda Triangle in itself.
And 14 years after his alleged UFO sighting in New York, May Pang reveals that Lennon had also spoken about a more sinister encounter he'd had while a boy in his home city.
Remarkably, in 1988, May Pang claimed that Lennon, in an interview with Larry Warren from the Merseyside Anomalies Research Association, claimed that as a child in Liverpool, he had been abducted by aliens. And as a result of this experience, he believed for the rest of his life that he was somehow different from most other human beings.
In 1980, John Lennon was assassinated by a deranged fan, Mark Chapman, on New York City's 72nd Street. It happened just blocks from where he claimed to have seen the UFO with May Pang 6 years earlier. But even now, more than 40 years on, questions about his alleged UFO encounters persist.
Was John Lennon just swept up in the whole mania in the 1970s around UFOs? He was, for example, a subscriber to the British UFO magazine Flying Saucer Review. So was this just something that he wished to see, or was it a genuine UFO sighting? And for a man like him to believe in UFOs, to be fascinated by extraterrestrial life, we have to wonder why he was so interested. Did he know something that we don't?
March 2022. John Greenwald of website The Black Vault puts in a Freedom of Information request to find out what the US government knows about UFOs. And this is what he got back.
And this report was released by the Pentagon, home of the U.S. Department of Defense.
It had previously only been seen by select members of the United States Congress.
Anyone opening the report is immediately confronted by the fact that it is so heavily redacted. There are blackouts everywhere.
Reading from the report, it says the following. The most common shape described by military personnel in their reporting was a redacted. Several sightings were redacted, and resembled redacted shapes like a redacted or a redacted.
The shapes of UFOs are clearly a closely guarded secret in the corridors of power. But why is the US military so wary of releasing the information it has on these phenomena?
Circles, discs, cigars, tubes, triangles, they've been seen in our skies throughout history.
In fact, the same shapes have been appearing for at least 450 years. In the 16th century, the German city of Nuremberg was a busy and prosperous medieval metropolis. But on the 14th of April 1561, the townsfolk wake up to a sight beyond anything they had seen or heard before.
The shapes were described as globes and tubes.
They were seen by hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals. And we're talking about a time where mankind did not have any technology that could fly.
A local artist fortunately felt the need to record the extraordinary event. His woodcut print shows distinctive solid objects in the sky, saucer-shaped circles, and bizarre tubes. And these objects are engaged in a terrifying aerial battle.
Differently shaped objects zigzagged and zoomed through the sky, sometimes crashing into each other, appearing to fight before crashing to the earth and leaving a plume of smoke.
They were described by eyewitnesses as in some sort of what appeared to be a dogfight or some sort of aerial combat.
The illustration is published in a broadsheet with a text from Hans Glaser, a woodcutter and printer.
Translated from the Old German, Glaser described that after the aerial battle, there appeared
something like a black spear, very long and thick. The shaft pointed to the east, the point pointed west. Whatever such sign means, God alone knows.
3 types of objects were seen in the sky that day: cigar-shaped tubes, spheres or discs, and finally, a triangle.
Glaser reports that such images have been seen in the sky before, and they're believed to be celestial messages from God.
He's perhaps warning that God-fearing residents should take this as a sign to repent and to beg God to avert his wrath.
The woodcut is one of the most controversial 16th century drawings in existence. Debate still rages about exactly what happened that morning in 1561.
The human eye is fallible. It's really good at what it does, but the human eye can also be fooled, and that's why we have things called optical illusions.
The famous psychoanalyst Carl Jung dismissed the woodcut in 1957, saying that what was depicted here was just an ordinary natural phenomena like a swarm of insects. Jung argues that ancient peoples would see gods, demons, dragons, or monsters, whereas in modern times we're more likely to interpret them as being technological products, the vehicles inhabited by alien beings with capabilities far beyond our understanding.
So, an insect swarm could perhaps morph in our minds into something otherworldly, and so could other natural phenomena.
Others have said the Nuremberg sighting could be a misinterpretation of a sundog. This is an artifact of sunlight reflecting off ice crystals high in the atmosphere.
But these explanations don't explain a remarkable coincidence. The National UFO Reporting Online Database surveyed over 90,000 reports of modern-day sightings and of discernible shapes. The sphere, the triangle, and the oval, or cigar, are the most common. The very shapes from the Nuremberg woodcut.
Is it simply a coincidence that the objects bear such a striking resemblance to the objects that we've photographed and seen in the 21st century?
And consistently through the ages, UAPs have presented in these 3 standard geometric forms.
So why are these shapes considered such sensitive information?
The shape of an object can tell you a lot about its performance characteristics and its attributes. It will allow you to understand its friction coefficients, its aerodynamics, and ultimately its performance capabilities.
But these are almost always top secret in military and intelligence circles.
And there's speculation that the shapes relate to a secret advanced technology that was believed to be purely theoretical: gravity wells.
A gravity well is simply a delta or a difference in the gravitational pull in a localized area.
The round saucer is the basic gravity well, the cigar is 2 gravity wells next to each other, and the triangle is 3 gravity wells.
The concept of gravity wells as a source of power is mostly associated with massive cosmic objects, like our own sun, pulling on orbiting planets. But a civilization more advanced than our own could manipulate these forces on a much smaller scale.
The more mass you have in a smaller volume, the greater that pull is. You get to a point where that pull is so sufficient that space itself is ripped away. The very fabric of space and time, think of a zipper, is literally pulled apart.
The different shapes could represent a range of vehicles from the same civilization, harnessing this power for different purposes. But there could be an alternative scenario, the one depicted in the Nuremberg woodcut.
We definitely know that there's different shapes of craft. Are they piloted by different factions? The answer to that question is we don't know.
The battle raging in the sky over Renaissance Germany may point to aggressive clashing civilizations, squabbling violently over the planet below. Humans reduced to mere helpless onlookers. Governments might fear this ancient war could spark again at any time.
Perhaps in this depiction of devastating alien aerial combat, we're seeing the shape of things to come.
(2018), America. Late at night, a security camera in a deserted games room picks up a strange form, followed by unexplained activity. First, the pool table comes alive. Then, the pinball machine. Evidence, some say, of a paranormal presence known as a poltergeist.
Classic poltergeist activity includes things moving around, weird noises, or even the sound of invisible footsteps. And this sort of thing has been documented for thousands of years.
Terrifying supernatural events like these are traditionally linked to ideas of the afterlife or the spirit world. But a leaked slide from a presentation by the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program to US military officials could change everything.
Slide 9 is really weird. It seems to link what we call UFOs to these kinds of supernatural powers.
This top secret and explosive report was discovered by a blogger who released it into the public domain on August the 9th, 2018. It has since been authenticated by the former head of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Luis Elizondo.
I've got to be very careful because that is an official government slide. That was part of an official government briefing. And I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about it other than that it is a real slide.
Slide 9 begins with talk of the ability to manipulate both physical and cognitive environments, and then lists examples. It's official jargon for paranormal activity, or what some would call ghostly phenomena.
Well, what is a ghost? These are things that exist that aren't in our plane, in our reality. Well, some people say the same thing about UFOs.
The slide talks about the penetration of solid surfaces. Remember ghosts that walk through walls?
In popular imagination, UFOs are nuts and bolts spaceships, piloted by flesh and blood creatures from other planets.
But in many so-called UFO cases, the occupants behave more like ghosts than real solid creatures.
In 2007, the French government released a report from the town of Cusack, in which 2 school children saw a UFO, a sphere-like craft, in which they saw 4 black-clad individuals literally passing straight through its walls. They literally floated right into it.
But the link between UFOs and the paranormal, inferred in slide 9, has been made before.
In 1995, government contractor Robert Bigelow set up an organization called NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science, to investigate the phenomenon of UFOs.
Researchers who worked on this program say that they discovered a link between UFOs and poltergeists, and they called that the hitchhiker effect.
The hitchhiker effect is when UFO witnesses have subsequent paranormal experiences that seem to attach to them.
Those experiences continue to happen and are recurring. And there are people who report that as the case.
And it's not only the witnesses themselves who are affected.
There was a man called Jim Axelrod, and he said that he observed strange orbs in the sky in Utah. And when he returned home to Virginia, his wife apparently began to see these weird, ghostly, humanoid figures in their house.
Then one day, his children reported that they were downstairs and looking out the window, they saw a 7-foot-tall wolf-like creature standing up on hind legs and staring at them intently until it ran off at high speed, still on 2 legs. Clearly not normal canine activity.
These UFO-related paranormal experiences seem fantastical, but many are seen by multiple witnesses, so can't simply be dismissed as figments of the imagination.
It implies that this phenomenon manipulates reality in such a way to create not just hallucinations, but real events.
But for many, while UFOs may now be accepted as real, linking them to paranormal activity is a step too far. Instead, scientists and parapsychologists have searched for more conventional causes behind accounts of the supernatural.
Chris French, the parapsychologist at London's Goldsmiths College, has said that there is a logical explanation for many of these things. Take noises. Those can be explained by water hammering in pipes and radiators. Weird fires, they can be explained by regular home electrical faults. And how about objects being moved or seeming to be thrown around? They can be explained by structural faults, rats, beetles, birds, and even seismic activity like little earthquakes.
Michael Persinger at Laurentian University says infrasound might excite activity in the brain's temporal lobes. This could then stimulate the perception of a ghostly figure. And a team at the Association of Pacific Rim Universities proposed that electromagnetism could induce effects that humans could interpret as supernatural.
But some experts believe there is such a branch of scientific research and behavior that could account for genuine paranormal phenomena.
Quantum physics studies the behavior of reality at an atomic or subatomic level. Objects behave differently at this level to the rest of the physical world.
If you look at slide 9, what it seems to imply is that these spooky effects observed at quantum level are being used by the phenomena we call UFOs.
It's a belief backed up by University of Cambridge Nobel Prize winner Professor Brian Josephson. He says that paranormal phenomenon will come to be regarded the same way as quantum entanglement is now. That is, a seemingly impossible idea that is now accepted by mainstream science.
Intriguingly, slide 9 concludes by implying the US government already has some understanding of the mechanisms at work.
It says the DoD controls several facilities where events like this have taken place. And sensationally, it also says that the DoD has actually been involved in similar experiments in the past.
There's a lot that we don't understand. And there's a lot that we should be trying to understand.
Who knows what goes on behind the scenes at America's top secret laboratories and military installations? Perhaps they don't want us to find out.